Welcome to another edition of Special Report Online. I'm Brett Baer. This is our Center Seat segment, a special segment with Republican presidential candidate Ron Paul. Thanks for sticking around. A lot of people typing in. By the way, we have a poll up. In our Fox News poll today, you were in fourth, but in this poll online, you get 49% of those typing in. A lot of questions. Many people asking a variety of things. Here's one. Asking about your immigration policy. You got into the fence situation, but they want to know specifically how would you handle immigration?
But of course, that's a fairly complicated subject. I've written a pretty long paragraph in my last book on immigration. But basically, I think we should have more border patrols and better immigration work.
So you would put troops on the border?
No, I don't want troops, but I want facilities. I want the border guards, not the border guards, but the immigration people. I think we're very inept. But I think it's an economic problem. You know, if we were a thriving economy, we'd be short of labor and we'd want labor to come in. So economics is a bad thing. The welfare system has something to do with it. Because it is true, I know people argue with us on this, but it is true that some of our people don't work because they lose too much money if they go to work and they get off welfare. So I think there's some of that. So the welfare system discouraged some of our workers. But it also, the mandates from the federal government are very detrimental. In Texas, we have hospitals going broke and schools going broke. So they come over and they get these free services. I would think that there should be no amnesty, no easy way, even if you have to deal, and I think there's no way you're going to send 15 million people home. But you should deal with something with a different category, but they shouldn't get the right to vote very easily. There should be no rewards for breaking the law. But I would like to see a more efficient immigration at the border.
Juan?
So far, in that seat, the center seat, we've had Michelle Bachmann, Santorum, even Gary Johnson and John Huntsman just yesterday. Now, when we asked about whether or not they would support you, if you are the Republican nominee, we got a lot of hesitation, reservations. Is it the case that you will support whomever the Republican nominee is?
Well, I would check out their platform by that time. I would think that they would have to have a certain position on the Federal Reserve, certain position on cutting spending, certain position on civil liberties. And if they shift a little bit, I quite well may be able to.
Well, it sounds like you're saying no. So let me then follow up with this question.
I would have to make a later decision.
Yeah, you're not saying yes. Okay, so what happens then? Everybody in this town thinks there's going to be a third-party candidate, an independent candidate. If you don't get the Republican nomination, could that independent candidate be Ron Paul?
No, look, Juan, you have to realize, let's say I was thinking about that, and I said that, then it would undermine what I'm doing. I'm running for president. I'm doing pretty well. I'm in third. So, no, I'm running for president in the Republican Party. I'm doing very well. And last time they wondered about it. But, you know, the whole thing is boy, the people are really frustrated. You go to New Hampshire, there are more independents than Republicans or Democrats.
Well, that's true.
Well, how about this?
Nationally, yeah, so there it is.
But what you're saying is you are not saying that you will not run as an independent.
Well, what I say is that I have no plans to do it.
All right.
So how about, are you big on pledges? Would you pledge here tonight that you would not run in a third party?
I pledge that I have no intention of doing it.
All right.
I'm running for this Republican primary.
That's pretty political, Congressman.
Well, you know, I have to vacillate a little bit in my life.
Okay.
You need a grammarian who'll work on that sentence.
Steve?
I wanted to revisit our discussion about Osama bin Laden and the Taliban. After the raid, you said this: we've created a lot of enemies because that's what the Taliban is all about. They're organized and they're motivated by the fact that we're occupying their land. Which land? Which Taliban land were we occupying on 9/11?
On 9/11, we had a major air base in Saudi Arabia, and they wrote and talked about it, and they complained about it.
But the Taliban, not not in Afghanistan.
No, just Americas in the Middle East on their Holy Land, which aggravated the Al-Qaeda at that time. Now, the Taliban's a little bit different because their goal is not to come over here. Al-Qaeda will come over here. So that's quite a bit different. But Talibans are, people who want to just get us out of their country. That's why it's Afghanistan and all. But, we went into Iraq. There was no Al-Qaeda there, and they're there now. Everybody always recognizes that there's not a huge number, but there are probably hundreds of Al-Qaeda. They weren't there before. The Christians have been run off from Iraq, and now Iraq is much closer to Iran than ever before. So I don't think there's much victory there.
Well, there were Al-Qaeda in Iraq beforehand, but I won't. I'll let Charles answer that. We could do about a 3-hour debate on that, but I'll let Charles go next.
All right, Congressman, 1 + 1 equals 2. That's this person's login. What area of policy are you weakest in?
What area? Well, I only have one subject that I'm interested in, and I don't consider myself weak, and that is the defense of liberty, because I think that's what America's all about, and I know what it is. I know what it means to be free and what civil liberties mean and what it means to the free market, and also it advises about our foreign policy. At the same time, the founders understood this very clearly, and they wrote a document which, fortunately for me, endorses the idea of individual liberty. So it's individual liberty I feel very strong in. I would say my weakest trait would be that I could always improve on my delivery, and convince people. But young people with more open minds and open hearts, they seem to understand what I'm saying.
You did well in the delivery of that non-pledge.
Mike in Bogota writes, what is your stance on global warming? Man-caused?
Partially, but I think the radical environmentalists have taken it over. Just recently, some major publications and universities have made some reports on this that, to me, are very, very strong. And these are scientists that says that it's been way overblown. So I write about that in the book, but I think that the environmentalists take advantage of it. But to say that man doesn't contribute, but statistics that show long term, hundreds if not thousands of years, we're not about, to melt. Besides, one thing that really made me wonder about this, when they took some of these same scientists now that talked about a warming trend, they were worried about an ice age 30 or 40 years ago. That made me wonder, what's going on here. But the reason that we don't do well for libertarians and conservatives is they think that if we don't endorse the EPA, we don't care about the environment. So I think it makes a point that we ought to be much better in defending the environment as property rights people, rather than saying that we have to depend on a bureaucrat from Washington making sure the environment is protected.
Charles.
You're a defender of liberty. Is there any drug you would not legalize under your administration if you were in power? Could I walk into any store and buy marijuana, heroin, meth, or crack cocaine? Is there any that you would not allow me to buy on the free market?
Yeah, the way I understand the Constitution, the federal government shouldn't be in this business of legalizing anything, so the federal government shouldn't make anything illegal. But the states have this authority to do it. The federal government tried to make alcohol illegal, and prohibition doesn't work very well.
Meth and alcohol aren't exactly equivalent.
Well, yeah, I know, but if you compare it to marijuana, alcohol kills a lot more people than marijuana.
I agree, but
my
position
is, to answer your question, my position is the federal government should butt out, because they've only been involved in about 100 years, and they've sort of messed up. Yeah. We've spent over $1 trillion in the war on drugs, hasn't done a bit of good. The states still have prerogatives on alcohol. They have it, and they can protect children and do all these things. So, yes, there's a way. It's not like when you legalize something, you endorse something. It's just dealing with it in a different manner. So the states would still have a prerogative on dealing with it.
If you're a believer in liberty as a principle, and you were, say, the governor of Texas, why would you, as governor of Texas, any more want to make it illegal to purchase crack than you would if you were the president? I understand the principle of federalism, but as a matter of principle, why would you, as governor, not want to cancel all the laws in Texas that outlawed the purchase of these drugs?
Why would you want to cancel out what the founders gave us in our documents? And it was always legal up until last century, at 19.
So you would legalize if you were the governor?
I would let the states do it, and that would be the way that it's supposed to be done. And it was that way. I don't know why we've given up on liberty so soon, because are you going to use it if somebody legalizes something? This whole idea that it's legal, you're all going to be drug addicts.
Depends what you're offering me.
Congressman,
Nobody uses it because it's legal. They use it because it's illegal.
On the same line, you have an ad out about pro-life. And what is your position on the federal government's role in abortion, and what should be legal and what shouldn't be legal? If you make that argument on the drugs, are you making the argument then that the federal government should be out of pro-life, pro-choice?
Sure. That would be the logical conclusion. But there's a little bit. I mean, when the government's so much involved in medicine, you've got to make sure they don't use our money to do abortions. The military, you can have some controls there. But the federal government cannot. I mean, this is the whole reason why Roe versus Wade made such a mess of it. It was a Texas law. They prohibited it. There was Roe versus Wade. They nationalized it. Now, many right-to-life people are saying, what we need is a Supreme Court ruling and amend the Constitution. But they don't accept my bill, which removes the jurisdiction. I would remove the jurisdiction, that's We the People's Act, on these various things, and just say that if the states do something, try to get the federal government out of it. We don't want the Supreme Court legislating as they did in Roe versus Wade. So I would apply the same rule to that.
So the states would make the decision, and not the federal government.
The state would do it.
Congressman, let's go to Republican politics. This week, Rick Perry said it's good politics to keep the birther issue alive. Now, he's gone back and forth on this, but do you think it's good politics to kind of prod and poke at President Obama over where he was born?
No, I don't think it's good politics. I think it's probably bad politics. But one thing about that, why didn't anybody ever ask whether his mother was a citizen? If she was a citizen, it would have to be an automatic, and it would make the whole thing moot. No, I don't think it's good politics at all. I never bring the subject up.
Steve?
When I was watching the video of your rollout of the plan to restore America, one of the things that surprised me was you don't call for the abolition of the Fed, at least not right away.
Right.
So who would your Fed chairman be?
Jim Grant, probably.
And what are his main arguments?
He's an Austrian economist. He has experience on Wall Street. He's brilliant. He's a good historian. He'd quit printing money. No, I don't call for the abolishment, but almost all the things that I have done and proposed, like in medicine, I want medical savings accounts, I want a transition, I want freedom of choice schools, just make sure we never make it illegal, that we can't have homeschooling and private schooling, and just legalize competition. In money, the bill that I have is to legalize choice, take off taxes, sales taxes and capital gain tax on money, which is gold and silver, because that is, the Constitution still says gold and silver is legal tender. So, but to close down the Fed tomorrow, even back when I was on the Gold Commission in the early 80s, it was my same position. This is Hayek's position, competing currencies. And this way you don't have to be disruptive and say, we're going to close down the Fed. The financial system is going to close itself down. That's what I fear. That's why I think it's so desperate that we get control of this budget, because every single day we're getting closer to something bigger than we've ever had before.
What would you do to help the Europeans out, especially if you look at what's going on in Greece? That could have terrible repercussions on our economy. It's a global structure. We can't kind of wall ourselves off. So what would Ron Paul do if he was over at the Fed to help Greece out, or would you ignore it?
I'd keep my hands off, because the only thing you can do is print more money. See, it looks like our economy was saved by the bailouts and the Fed creating $15 trillion and sending $5 trillion overseas. Sure, it temporized it, but it's also ushering in the age of inflation, and it's perpetuated
There's no inflation.
Oh, it's 9% right now. If you use the old CPI, it's 9%. And even our own government admits it is over 3 today.
It's tiny. Come on.
Talk to this consumer. You go shopping?
Congressman, if you're okay for a couple more questions, I know we're at 7:15. If you're okay, Mans of South Carolina wants to know who your VP pick would be.
I'm going to win the nomination first before I pick him.
Matt Simon would like to know how President Paul would immediately stimulate the economy.
Immediately. Well, since I want the troops home, and I can do that as president, you bring the troops home from Korea and all these places, have them spend all that money here. And that would be a little boost until we iron out our foreign policy, but bring the troops home and let them spend their money and send a signal that all the regulations written and all the executive orders that compounded our problems in the financial sector, the president can do a lot to change that. We're over-regulated and overtaxed. You need Congress to get the taxes back in order, but you need to send a signal. We're going to live within our means. We're going to have sound money. We're going to shrink the size of the Federal Register, and we'll go back to sanity and have our Constitution back someday.
Jeff says, what about the fair tax? Where do you stand?
I probably would vote for, I'm not a co-sponsor. The fair tax is the sales tax, and I don't think it's completely fair. It's not fair to retired people, and it's not fair to, it's a regressive tax. I think the poor, get stuck with that.
What would your tax plan be?
0, 0, 0. I mean, I would like to get rid of the income tax and the corporate tax and shrink the size of government. And we only had an income tax since 1913.
So wait.
Anything
0, 0, 0. You mean to tell me? Yeah, I know. But what is the real President Paul going to do on taxes?
I'll do anything I can to lower them. Anything and everything. Tax is a burden. But the reason I don't emphasize that as much, and I'm not on any bills, is spending is the tax. Spending takes the money out of the community, then they tax us, then they borrow it, and then they print it. And it all goes back and destroys the economy, pushes the prices up for the poor, and the poor suffer more than the rich. The characteristic of the destruction of a currency, we're about 98% devaluation since the Fed came in. When you destroy a currency, and this comes from Austrian economics, that there's a transfer of wealth from the middle class to the wealthy. And this is why the Wall Streeters are right, but I'm not sure the occupiers understand this. But this is always the case. And then they get the control and the power. They get the bailouts. But what happens to the middle class? They lose their jobs and they lose their houses. So,
but if you do a massive cut at the beginning of a Paul presidency,
right,
doesn't that in itself affect the economy in a detrimental way immediately?
Not necessarily. Study what happened after World War II. 10 million people came back. They weren't given jobs. The military budget was slashed, I think, approximately 50 or 60%. Taxes went down. And all of a sudden, jobs became available again. But they didn't have to worry about 10 million people. Where were they going to go? And I'm not even advocating that. It's going to be through attrition. My program it gets rid of people through attrition, and it won't be overnight, just as the Federal Reserve is through attrition and through gradual changes.
Charles, last one.
Well, this is sort of out of left field, but if a major waterway, Suez Canal or the Panama Canal, fell into hostile hands, what would you as Commander-in-Chief do, if anything?
I'd look at it and study it and find out if it was a threat to our national security and go to the Congress, find out if they want to declare war, who the enemy is, and take care of it and get it over with.
Clive in Ireland, Dr. Paul has delivered 4,000 babies. Is that harder than politics?
It's... Well, I better not say what I was going to say.
It's messier? Was that what you're going to say?
I mean, it's a lot more enjoyable than being grilled. Medicine is wonderful, and delivering babies was wonderful. And as my wife always said, an OB doctor is one of the few doctors that gives you something. A lot of times, a doctor can only give you your health back. And there was something very wonderful about it, and I loved it. Like I said, they didn't usually give me too much grief. Those babies were glad to get out.
Do you need to win Iowa? Where do you need to finish?
In the top. I would be disappointed with third, but I should be. If I come in third, I'm still alive, but I think I better do first or second in a couple of those. I have to do well in January.
Okay. Congressman Paul, thank you very much for the time. I think we set a record online. We'll check it out after this. Thanks for watching Special Report Online. And remember, we have had you on quite a bit. So tell everybody that's a supporter that we're all right. Okay. Join us Fox News Channel every weekday at 6 p.m. Eastern for Special Report. We'll see you next center seat next week. Herman Cain on Tuesday. Control Room. See you later.